Picture yourself sitting across from your neighbor at a backyard barbecue, watching them talk about their recent vacation while showing off their new car and scrolling through photos of their remodeled kitchen. You're nodding along and thinking about your own financial situation, wondering how the hell they afford all of this. Maybe they make way more money than you, or maybe they inherited wealth, or maybe they're just better at this whole money thing. What's actually happening will blow your mind, and the numbers tell a very different story. A 59% chance exists that they couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency without going into debt, which means they look financially stable on the outside, while behind closed doors, the average American's financial reality sits absolutely terrifying. My name is Seb, and I've spent way too much time diving into financial data because apparently reading Federal Reserve reports is what I do for fun. People turn to me when they want to understand what's actually happening with money in America, not the sanitized version you get from financial advisors trying to sell you something. If you're tired of feeling like everyone else has figured out this money thing except you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you want more real talk about personal finance, without the typical guru nonsense. What we're diving into today covers the average American's finances as they actually look, not what they should look like according to some finance textbook, but what they really look like. The numbers I'm about to share come straight from the Federal Reserve, Census Bureau, and major financial institutions tracking millions of accounts. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why building wealth feels impossible for most people, and it has nothing to do with your daily coffee habit. When you hear the phrase average American, what financial picture comes to your mind before we dive into the specific numbers? TV shows, social media, and even financial advisors who talk about the typical household give us an image where the average person has maybe $10,000 or $20,000 in savings with a little credit card debt and is doing okay. The truth stings a little because the average American sits one unexpected expense away from financial catastrophe. Latest data from the Federal Reserve shows only 63% of Americans could cover a $400 emergency with cash, which amounts to less than a car repair, less than an ER visit, less than a busted water heater. Bankrate's 2025 Emergency Savings Report found that 59% of people couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency from their savings account, and that gets worse from there. 27% have absolutely zero emergency savings. None whatsoever. Nothing. Zilch. Why this matters goes beyond just the scary statistics. Because when you're operating without a financial buffer, every single decision becomes loaded with anxiety. Your car makes a weird noise, and instead of getting it checked, you pray it goes away. Your tooth hurts, but you wait months hoping it gets better. And that's not just stressful because your brain literally spends cognitive energy on survival mode instead of building wealth. Research from Harvard shows that financial scarcity reduces cognitive function by 13 IQ points, which means your brain stays so busy managing immediate threats that it can't focus on long-term planning, like trying to build a house while the foundation constantly shifts. Where Americans actually stand financially starts with real numbers that financial institutions use when they look at us as data points, and I'm going to give you those exact figures. Median household net worth in America sits at $192,700, which includes everything like your house, your retirement accounts, your checking account, minus all your debts. Before you start feeling good or bad about that number, what nobody tells you is that the mean net worth reaches $1,063,700. And just think about what that means. A small number of people have so much wealth that they pull the average way up, creating a gap where the average lands 5.5 times higher than the median. Half of all Americans combined own less than 3% of everything, because the bottom 50% of Americans own just 2.5% of all wealth in this country. And that should make you stop and think. Breaking this down by age gets really interesting when you look at the actual numbers. Early 30s means a median net worth of $39,000, and that's not a typo. A decade or more of working leaves the typical person under 35 with $39,000 accumulated in total wealth, which might equal half what your 20-year-old car is worth. People in their 60s have a median net worth of $274,000. But even that isn't enough to retire on if you're following traditional withdrawal rules. Debt represents the elephant in the room, and Americans carry $18.59 trillion in total household debt. When you add up mortgages, credit cards, student loans, auto loans, and everything else, the average household owes $104,755, and that's where the math gets brutal. Credit card debt specifically reached $1.233 trillion nationwide, which means the average household carrying credit card debt owes somewhere between $9,326 and $11,019, depending on which data source you use. The part that will blow your mind comes next, because the average interest rate on those cards runs between 20.97% and 22.30%. And let me show you exactly what that means in real dollars. Carrying $11,000 in credit card debt at 22% interest while making minimum payments means it's going to take you approximately 9 years and 8 months to pay off, and you'll end up paying roughly $3,109 in interest alone. That amounts to 28% more than you originally borrowed, which means you're paying for that vacation or emergency or whatever the debt came from almost twice. What nobody talks about is that while you're paying off that debt, you're not investing. And if you took that same monthly payment and invested it instead at 7% returns, you'd have built real wealth because the opportunity cost is massive. Retirement savings represent where most people completely mess this up, and that brings us to a number that should shock you. America's median 401k balance sits at $38,176. Not the average, but the median, which means half of all 401k accounts have less than that. Fidelity recommends you have 10 times your salary saved by age 67. So if you're making $60,000 a year, that's $600,000 you need, and the median person isn't even close. Younger people are screwed compared to what boomers experienced when you break it down by generation, and the numbers prove it. Baby boomers, who are now in their 60s and 70s, control 51.6% of all wealth in America, despite being only about 21% of the population, while Gen X has 25.7% of wealth. Millennials make up a similar population share as boomers, but have just 9.4% of all wealth, and Gen Z has about 2%. Boomers built wealth in an economy where houses cost 2.1 times annual income, and that's the uncomfortable reality we need to face. Today, that ratio reaches 5.6 times annual income, which means when boomers were buying homes in their 20s and 30s, they needed 2 years of full income to afford the median home, while today's young people need almost 6 years. That covers just the house price, because forget about the down payment, which now averages $70,000. Real numbers paint the picture of what home affordability looks like today, and these figures don't lie. 2025 saw the median existing home price hit $414,400. So if you want to buy that home with the traditional 20% down payment, you need $82,880 in cash. Your monthly payment, including principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, runs approximately $2,729 at current interest rates of around 6 to 7%. But that's not your real cost. Maintenance averages about $333 per month, and you also need to budget for that. Plus homeowners insurance, which has increased 48% since 2020. True monthly cost lands closer to $3,062. And to afford that under the 28% rule that mortgage lenders use, you need to earn $131,500 per year. Median household income sits at $83,730, so you see the problem now. Because the median income household cannot afford the median-priced home. First-time homebuyers now make up only 21% of the market, which represents the lowest share ever recorded. And the median age of a first-time buyer has climbed to 40 years old, up from the late 20s in the 1980s. Rent isn't any better, meanwhile, and the numbers prove it. Median rent ranges from $1,370 to $2,000, depending on location and unit type. And in major cities, you're looking at $2,500 to $3,500 easily. Over half of all renters are cost-burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing alone. So when housing eats up that much of your paycheck, there's nothing left to save. What nobody talks about when they give you financial advice reveals itself in these contradictions. Financial advisors tell you to save 20% of your income when 51.8% of renters already spend 30% or more just on housing. And they tell you to invest for retirement when 59% of people can't even cover a $1,000 emergency. The advice isn't wrong, it's just completely disconnected from the reality most people are living every single day. Things get really messed up from a psychological standpoint because your brain has something called loss aversion, which means losses feel about twice as painful as equivalent gains feel good. When you're already operating paycheck to paycheck, the pain of cutting your spending to save money feels enormous, while the benefit of having savings in some distant future feels abstract and small, which means you're fighting against your own neurology. Under 35 means $39,000 in net worth, and overall, the average American has $192,700. A $1,000 emergency can't be covered. Credit card debt sits at $11,000, carrying 22% interest. The 401k balance reaches $38,176. The median home price can't be afforded, and the top 10% controls 67% of all wealth, while the bottom 50% fights over 2.5%. I'm not sharing these numbers to depress you or make you feel hopeless, and that needs to be clear from the start. Understanding reality represents the first step to changing your situation. So when you realize that most people are struggling, and when you understand that the system is genuinely stacked against building wealth, you stop blaming yourself for not having it figured out. Banks and financial advisors want you to think this is your fault, that if you just cut out lattes and avocado toast, you'd be fine. Housing increased 129%, while incomes only increased 77%. The home price-to-income ratio went from 2.1 to 5.6. Student loans averaged $39,000, and childcare costs $14,760 per year. So this isn't about personal responsibility, because this is about mathematical reality. Knowing these numbers gives you power, though, and that's the thing that matters most. Smart decisions can't be made with bad information, so now you know what you're actually up against. Fake social media success stories can be ignored, while you start building wealth based on reality instead of fantasy. Traditional advice in this economy either continues to fail you or you adapt your strategy to match the world as it actually exists. And the choice is yours. Your future self will thank you for starting with the truth instead of comfortable lies. Picture yourself sitting